Welcome back, everyone, to the Crash the Pond podcast. It is a Monday, February 24th edition of the pod, and February is kind of come and gone almost already. It's crazy how fast things move nowadays.
Yeah.
I don't know why that's where I went, but that's where I went.
Yeah.
I'm
Shocker, the shortest month of the year is going by fast.
I'm gonna give a special shout out to Jake to start off the pod because
Okay.
for those who don't know, you are running off of very, very little sleep. You have a chaotic work schedule, and you are pushing through to do the pod tonight. So we applaud you. Everyone, give Jake his flowers in the chat. Put a little flower emoji.
Yeah, I've been up for 19 hours. Does that math check out?
Yeah.
Something like that.
So full disclosure.
So I may be a little delirious.
Full disclosure. Last night, I went to bed very late because my sleep schedule has just been all sorts of jacked up lately.
Oh no.
And I was on Discord, and at 1:30 a.m., I see Jake Rudolph post a GIF, "Rise and Grind," just to give everyone a little peek behind the curtain at when you got up.
Yep. That's when I've been up since today. So it's gonna be a fun show.
Yeah, that just sounds awful. But
Yeah.
you are here, and we will hold you to the same standard that we always do,
Oh,
regardless
great.
of how tired you are.
Lovely. Lovely.
So weird kind of time to be following the NHL because the league was put on hold for basically 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And it feels like the season is it's almost like a new season now. But before we get into that, just your quick thoughts maybe on the Four Nations face-off, and because I don't think we've really had a chance to touch on it on a podcast since it ended. So
I think we briefly touched on it on last week's Crash the Draft that we did, but obviously that was before the final. I will give myself a little pat on the back right now. I predicted Canada to win 3-2, and that is what ended up happening. I think overall the event was fantastic for the sport. I think you can look at it both from a positive and negative light in the sense of positive in the sense of it grew the game. This is what you want from international hockey. This came because the players gave a shit and all this stuff. You can also look at it from a critical light of why has this not happened in the last 9 years or however long it's been since 9 years that there haven't been a best on best international, because you look at what it does for the game, what it did for interest in the game with so many different shows, whether it be on ESPN and leading with it and not giving it just a little bit of time, but giving it a whole bunch of time. And so I just think from the global growth of the game, or not global, but the growth of the game within the U.S., this was absolutely fantastic. The fact that you had USA and Canada, and this was a great showing for Team USA with some of the first time really in a long time that they've had the talent to go toe-to-toe with Canada. And even though they lost, I think it ends up being an overall positive for everyone in this situation. And I think it really sets up the Olympics in a great mode. And I think, like, I see someone in our YouTube chat saying owners don't want top players dying. I mean, the thing is, this tournament allows them to be fine with it because they're making the money off of this.
yeah, I was going to say that I don't know if that's the right comment, but yes, go ahead.
Yes. But I think ESPN had like 9.9 million. What was it? 9.9, or was it? It was a very, very high
number. Yeah.
Very, very high number for non like ABC, non NBC, like one of the on an ESPN channel. And so I think this was just really great to see overall for the game. I had coworkers who aren't really hockey fans watch the game and talk to me about it afterwards. And also one of them and I were talking, or one of my coworkers and I were talking today, and he watched 2 hockey games on the weekend as a result of that. And like, that is like what you want from that tournament. And so I think overall the 2 weeks off was great. I think that the players really put it all out there for this situation. And I think it was a really, really good tournament and a really, really great final.
Yeah, the final was amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing ending in particular.
For you, yes.
I think the ending was the best part. This comment's already going to get me in hot water to start, but I think the USA team made themselves really unlikable in this tournament. At least to me, I think that the Kachuk shtick it wasn't for me. I think a lot of USA fans loved it, but the way that they were just talking it up in the media, especially after they beat Canada, uh, and then Matthew Tkachuk plays in the final, but then can't actually play. I think he didn't even play half the game, or he played about half the
He
game.
played like 6 minutes. I mean, that's my biggest critique of Team USA is just that decision.
But overall, the hockey was amazing. And I think that what I really love about this sport is that at the highest levels, in a best on best, every play matters. Every little play, every little pass, every little decision, every poke check, hit, whatever, what have you, breakout, forecheck, all of it all matters. And seeing those little details just kind of add up over the course of a game and then ultimately lead to the bigger plays is just what makes it so fun. Because, we watch so many games in a regular season that just don't feel like they matter. And watching something where everything is magnified to the nth degree was just a blast. And the level of skill, I mean, these guys can just bring it in a way that your average NHL team cannot. And that's a credit to the players, because the players made this tournament. They cared. They could have not. They could have treated it more like an exhibition. And instead certain guys' seasons are over because of playing in this tournament. Charlie McAvoy, Matthew Tkachuk's season might be over because of this tournament. So it is a credit to the players, and I think that they deserve all the credit, because ultimately, the reason you brought it up, the reason that there was no best on best for 9 years is because the NHL couldn't make a dime off of it, so they just shut it all down. I mean, that's the truth of that situation. So it was great. We got a brief cameo of Leo Carlsson for Sweden.
Yeah. Yep.
Can't really recall anything that he did that was noteworthy. No. I guess he got hit. He got hit by Brady Tkachuk.
Yeah, the only thing that I want to add about the final was just I think it's really nice, even from the rooting for Team USA side of it, to see Connor McDavid have a moment like that. I think after seeing kind of what he went through in the Cup final, getting so close, all that type of stuff, I think having the best player in the game scoring a goal like that, even if it is for the team that I'm not rooting for, that is good for the game in general. I mean, I think Crosby having the gold medal goal, as painful as that was a big deal for that happening. And I think that this really helps Connor McDavid's legacy. And so I think you're witnessing history when you watch that.
Yeah, I mean, just seeing, it was just so picture perfect, because you have Marner with a perfect pass to McDavid, and he scores in a clean shot. So many times those overtime goals are kind of greasy point shots that go off a stick or go off a leg, and this one was as pretty as it gets. So it was great. It was great. Okay, but let's talk about the Ducks.
Yeah.
That's enough of the Four Nations. As much as I enjoyed it, I'm kind of looking forward to not hearing the term best on best ad nauseum every day for the next little while.
Well,
we need to find a different term than best on best, or just like a change up.
Something like that. But I do want to add this. I think that having 2 weeks off was really good. I think that this was the perfect time. I know that the owners with the Olympics say they don't want to shut down the season for 3 weeks because it's a 3-week shutdown versus 2. But I think having this shutdown is actually really great, because before we jump into these games, everyone knows my opinion of the team going into the break. I thought they weren't actually playing that well. We had that last podcast that we had with the debate, and fun times were had with that. But I think these 2 weeks off allowed me to kind of put that on the back burner, look at where this team's at, and try to look at this team with a fresh set of eyes. And I think having a break at this point in time, going down the stretch, allowed the players to rest, allowed me to kind of get all that out of my system, and in some ways try to assess this team on its own going into this stretch run that's coming up. And I think that from my personal vantage point, I think it was really nice to see, or really nice to have that. And I felt kind of refreshed going into these games on the weekend.
Yeah, the Ducks have 26 games left in their season. So this is really the stretch run. And going into that first game against the Bruins, which is kind of funny because that's where the Four Nations was, pretty much a fresh slate. I mean, you've got everyone healthy. John Gibson was starting in net. Pavel Minchikov was scratched going into this game. I guess that's the only real note. Lineup-wise, you saw Olin Zellweger get into the lineup. You saw Zellweger on a pairing with Jacob Trouba, Dumoulin, alongside Drew Hellison, and then your Gudis-Lacombe pairing. But This was a crazy game. I mean, we don't have to go through every single aspect of it, but the Ducks win 3-2 in overtime, and I think the highlight of this game for me is the fact that the Ducks in the first period had arguably their best period of the season. I mean,
Yeah.
they outshot the Bruins 17-7. Trevor Zegras scores a really pretty goal in transition, on man rush, really nice passing sequence between him and Jackson Lacombe. Frank Vetrano scores a goal off a really nice pass from Radko
Yes.
Gudas of all people.
Yeah.
So, at least from my standpoint, I thought it was a great period for the Ducks and really showed what they can do. How did you see that period?
Yeah, I would agree. And I think in 4-on-4 was where the Ducks almost looked their most dangerous. Just I think with the talent on the team, and as much as there are going to be various points in time on this podcast, I'm going to be critical of Greg Cronin, just throwing that out there. But I think he deserves credit for the 4-on-4 situation of the unit that he threw out there right away. I think was Leo Carlson, Trevor Zegras, and Jackson Lacombe, and I think it was Olin Zellweger. I think that those were the four guys out there to start the 4-on-4 situation, and they get rewarded with that goal by Trevor Zegras. I think on, what was it, a back and puck went to Jackson Lacombe, who fed it back to Trevor Zegras, who is able to bury it with a quick release.
Well,
Am I remembering that goal correctly?
the way the play starts is that Olin Zellweger shuts down David Pasternak one-on-one. Really nice sequence from him to just kind of strip the puck cleanly, then just chips it out to Carlson, who bumps it to Zegras, and then Lacombe and Zegras go tic-tac-toe. So,
Yeah.
and it was a really slick finish by Zegras too on the forehand.
And this was kind of the exact opposite of what we've said, or the frustration with Greg Cronin's way of playing, which is that late in periods, he's really focused on the veterans. He's taken Olin Zellweger off the ice. He's taken Drew Hellison off the ice, which Drew Hellison off the ice, not as critical, but and gone with Brian Dumoulin and Jacob Trouba together. And this was with like a couple minutes left in the period, I think maybe 3 minutes left in the period, and 4-on-4, and he just throws out all the young kids there in a 0-0 game. And so it was kind of the exact opposite of what we've seen. It was really nice to see that. I think even before that, though, at 5-on-5, the Ducks had some really good looks. The Ducks had a really nice rush, I think, where Trevor Zegras gets the puck, finds a trailing Jackson Lacombe. I think Lacombe looked really, really good in this game, jumping up into the play. And then you're right on with the goal after the second goal in this period with Radko Gudas probably making his best pass of the season, finding Frank Vetrano, like you said.
Yeah, it's funny how he just has that like forehand kind of. He starts off looking like he's going to shoot it, and then he wires it across. He's done that a couple times this season, but that was a great connection. Well, and I think that. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and I think that that's what you want to see from Gudas more. I think firing slap shots off from the point randomly doesn't really do a whole lot all the time. You're just hoping for chaos. If you're able to pick your head up and find a pass like that, a shot pass, that's so much more likely to go in. And so we haven't seen Gudas do that really that much this season, but if he's able to find that part of his game and bring that out a bit more, it's going to be much better for this Ducks team offensively.
Yeah, and I think that in that period, you really saw kind of the fruits maybe of Greg Cronin's system, where when this team is rested and when they're full of energy and they have their legs, they can really get on top of teams. I mean, they were not giving the Bruins a lot of room. They did have a bit of a squirrely 5-ish minute stretch.
I was going to say that they had some really rough turnovers,
but yeah, but that happens. I mean, it's one period. Like, you can't play a perfect 20 minutes. And I will. The thing for me is that yes, they had a very brief little struggle in there, but for me, it's okay. Did the rest of your play outweigh that? And I will take the offense that they brought and that they were able to generate, if it means, okay, maybe you're going to give up a little bit more here and there. And like, that's the balancing that you're doing when you're analyzing these things. Is sure, maybe if you're giving something up, are you at least getting more of it on the other side, which they haven't done this season.
And what I want to add there, and I was going to say with this, is yes, they did allow those chances against, and they were really high danger looks against. Some front net chances. Morgan Geekie, I think, had 3 or 4 in that first period, and John Gibson played really well to stop him on those. But I think they did a good job of not falling into the trap that they fell into a lot throughout the season prior to this, which was maybe they were doing a better job of not allowing these types of high danger looks and these breakdowns, but they weren't getting caught in their own zone, really. They were having these breakdowns, but they were largely just due to some errors, and those are much easier to clean up. The systemic issues that they were having that were leading them to getting caught in their own zone weren't necessarily there. It was just some chances here and there that were coming against. And I think that is a change in what's happening. I don't really know. I didn't dive into this first period enough to really figure out exactly what the change was, what the difference is there. But there was a change in that they weren't getting hemmed in their own zone really that much overall. And overall throughout the game, I don't think they did either.
I think it's just really a matter of execution. I mean, this team has a style that they play that we know is that we have argued is maybe not the most conducive, but this style can work,
Sure.
and this style does work for a lot of teams. And when it is clicking, when they're on top of pucks, when they're taking time and space away, when they're turning that into counterattacks, it looks good. It's just, can you sustain that? That's always the question.
Yeah.
And in the second period, they didn't really have a chance to sustain it because they ended up taking 4 penalties in the second period, and kind of all of the progress that we saw in the first basically evaporated in the second period. I mean, just some horrific penalty taking. I don't really have a whole lot to say about this period except that they took a lot of penalties and did not play well.
Yeah, I mean, what I'll say about this period is we saw the Ducks really this season start to play a whole lot better from a discipline perspective. They weren't taking they kind of stopped the penchant for taking penalties. And the weird thing is typically as the season goes on and as you get to these later stage games throughout the season, the penalties in a game typically go down. And so it's interesting and fascinating that I think that as things are tightening up a bit, the Ducks are taking more penalties. And I really don't actually want to get into the whole narrative that you hear on the broadcast about, well, if the Ducks
narrative?
if the Bruins were to do the same thing the Ducks did, they wouldn't have gone cold. That's not true. Every penalty the Ducks took were pretty much blatant in this game. They were deserved penalties. And I think getting into any sort of conversation outside of that really just ends up making you sound kind of like a complete homer and not really something that's worth part of the conversation. My opinion, the better thing to do in this situation is the Ducks are taking these penalties. What can they do first off to clean that up? Which is they need to stop putting their sticks into places. They need to stop. They need to move their legs. And the other part of this is if you're going to take these penalties, you have to be better on the penalty kill. And this has been one of their big issues this season is the penalty kill. Like they've had a few games here and there where they've been okay, but the penalty kill has not been good all season. It's been largely propped up by fantastic goaltending, and we'll get into the Red Wings game eventually. But the penalty kill just has not been good enough. They're allowing too many cross ice passes, things like that. Granted, 5-on-3 situation in the Boston game, and same thing when we get to the Red Wings game. But it still just not good enough.
They got some kills, but I think the Bruins power play is just not. It's not very good. That's part of it. Yeah. They still gave one up. Elias Lindholm scores, barely trickled through Gibson. But yeah, in that second period, they just didn't give themselves really much of a chance. I mean, if you take 4 penalties, you're playing basically half the period shorthanded. Yeah. That's just not a winning recipe. And then going into the third, they're up a goal. And I thought that one thing that we've been critical of this team is that when they take a lead going into the third, they tend to sit on it. They tend to turtle up, get into a shell. And I thought that in that period, there's always going to be score effects where if one team is trailing late, one team is leading, the team that's trailing is going to be more aggressive. That's just the truth about the sport.
Yeah.
But I thought that within that context, the Ducks did a better job than usual of still pushing the play, of still looking to possess and make plays. I mean, even in the last 3-ish minutes, they had the Carlson line had a really good shift deep in the Bruins territory. And it felt like, oh, wow, they're heading towards kind of a mature type of win where, yes, it was close and it wasn't pretty, but they execute when it really matters. And then eventually the Bruins score. Morgan Geekie, one-timer, initially ruled no goal, but eventually gets overturned and the Bruins tie it.
Yep.
And
do you want to jump into any of that? I'll leave that.
I don't think we need to deep dive that no-goal call, but basically they just ruled that Dostal was not impaired by the presence of Lindholm in his crease. Yeah. And I think that they got that right because, yes, there was contact, but there can be contact. It's just, does it impair your ability to make the save? And Dostal was able to get over. He was able to square up. And, I mean, it's just an unfortunate result. Yep. But then you go to overtime, 3-on-3, Ducks find a way. Leo Carlson 2-on-1, Terry goes over to Dumoulin. Dumoulin has the game on his stick, can't bury it, and then it comes out to Carlson, who's got an empty net basically to shoot at. And for those who have been following Leo Carlson this season, he has missed on a few empty nets. We'll just put it that way, much to everyone's chagrin. And yet this time he finds a way to put it in. I think he had a quote that he thought he was going to miss because of all the empty nets that he's missed this season, which I just kind of love from Leo Carlson. So I think overall, not a perfect game by any means from the Ducks, but definite signs of improvement in this game that
Sure.
I think you can be happy about.
Yeah, and I mean the Ducks, if you look at just like 5-on-5 numbers, they ended up having the better of the 5-on-5 numbers per evolving hockey when you score and venue adjust it. And so I think that as someone who was very critical of them going into their last little stretch, I think that coming into Boston on the road and being able to have a game where, yes, penalties are an issue. And yes, probably if you look at this game, they probably should have lost it due to the chances that they gave up in all situations. But I think having a very strong 5-on-5 game, really being able to push that and do something that they weren't really doing prior to the break, I think that this was a good sign for this little stretch run that the Ducks are on. And the other thing worth noting is John Gibson did not return for the third period. Lucas
Dostal, third. Yep.
Lucas Dostal had to take over for him in that third period there. And then I think some standout performances for me in this game. Jackson Lacombe. I think the McTavish line overall was really good. And then
Zegras
with his chances. I still don't love that line though overall of Zegras, Carlson, Killorn. I think we saw in that game. I can't remember if it was that game or the Red Wings game. I think it was the Red Wings game. But there's a specific like spot where Zegras ends up like kind of more acting like the center and carrying the puck and transporting the puck. And it's just so much more dangerous with that puck in that situation for him than being on the wing. And
yeah,
I think that's still for me just going to be a critique of this lineup. I think that plus Minchikov not playing are just two overall critiques where I think while it's good they're playing this way and this is good for them going down the stretch, I still just can't help but feeling like there's something being left on the table there.
Well, in that game, they left nothing on the table. They won. But I think that
in overall play, if you get what I'm saying.
Yes. I think that in that game, probably the biggest standout to me, which is kind of a low-hanging fruit, is Lucas Dostal, because he comes in the third period and had to make some 10-bell saves. Ultimately does give one up, but also had to be strong in overtime. So he gets a huge shout-out. And then outside of that, I didn't think that there were any great individual performances. It was just kind of a solid team effort. I think Zellweger was okay. We'll get into this more, but Drew Helleson is starting to look more like someone who should be not playing every single game. I'll just leave it at that. Want to blitz through the Red Wings game?
Yep, let's do it.
Before we talk about certain things.
Yep.
Yeah, so Ducks played last night. They lose 5-4 against the Detroit Red Wings, so tail end of a back-to-back. John Gibson is hurt. Same lineup. Olen Zellweger stays in. Pavel Minchikov remains scratched. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This game had a lot less positive than the game against Boston. Mm-hmm. It started off about as bad as you could hope for. They go down 3-0. They take penalties. They go down, I think, 5-on-3 at one point. The Red Wings make
2-minute 5-on-3 to start the game.
Yeah, the Red Wings make them pay twice on the power play. And yet, despite all of that, Ryan Strome pots one later after those penalties and just kind of keeps the Ducks alive. It's just 3-1 at that point. And at 5-on-5, they were okay. They were hanging in there in the first period. It's just that they put themselves in such a huge hole right away that makes everything kind of look worse than it might actually be. And then the second period, things don't really get all that much better. It really felt like for the majority of this game, kind of breaking it out from the period by period look, the Red Wings were just really clogging up the neutral zone. That kind of Todd McClellan special. They just could not. The Ducks couldn't do anything with the puck for the majority of this game, and it really took a late third period miracle of Olen Zellweger point shot and then a Cutter Gauthier beautiful backhand to scratch out a point out of this game. So process-wise, I don't have a lot of great things to say, but the good thing of this game is that you have your young players in Gauthier and Zellweger propelling you into overtime, and that matters.
Yes, and this game is an interesting one just from looking at the numbers perspective because they end up being, I think, on the positive side of 50% at 5-on-5.
Was it low event? I'm curious.
No, over 2.2. So not really that low event. The thing for the Ducks is it was mainly driven by just like a couple of really high danger looks in the first period, and then they had a couple of looks in the second period. But the Red Wings were just really continually, basically after the first period at 5-on-5, they were just continually generating play, really pushing offense towards that. And then in the third period, the Ducks really flatlined, and I think that for me is my biggest concern, frustration, things like that.
They looked dead in the third period.
The third period, they did not look good. They didn't really generate much offense prior to going at 6-on-5. And this was a game where I think in Boston with the lead, they looked like they were the team that was jumping on the front foot trying to generate offense. And they looked more dangerous offensively with a 1-goal lead in Boston in the third period than they did in this game, down 2 goals in the third period. And I think that to me is a bit of a concern. I think, yes, you take the 2 goals at 6-on-5 with the Ducks trying to get into the playoff mix that is currently going on. But this is the one where you would look and say, probably not repeatable, taking too many penalties in this game, making some really poor decisions, both with the puck and away from the puck.
Trevor Zegras.
We'll get there after in a minute. But this was the one that I wouldn't have as many takeaways from. I think realistically, they probably shouldn't have gotten a point out of this game, but I don't think getting a point is completely undeserved, I guess.
No, I think that if you remove the penalties, which I know is asking a lot, but if you remove that aspect, they weren't bad. They were just kind of lifeless. They just had a really tough.
They had a really great first period, which made it so their expected goal metrics were somewhat high throughout the game, and they kind of coasted on that.
I don't know if I'd call it a great first period. I think that they weren't bad in the sense that they were getting hemmed in, and it wasn't like 2018-19 Randy Carlyle or anything. It's just that they couldn't get themselves going. It feels like when this team is at its best, they're able to generate speed through the neutral zone and attack. And just get on top of the opposition. And in this game, there was a good, I want to call it 10-minute stretch where they just couldn't get past the red line. They just couldn't break through that barrier. And that's just, it's hard to succeed when that's going on.
Alex O'Vera brings this up, and I completely agree with it, saying, I get the backpack, but they have a habit of coming out completely flat in the third period of close games. Came alive very late, which is good to fight and claw for a point, but it's happened all season. And he's spot on. Completely spot on there, and that's been one of my bigger critiques of them. And that's why in the Boston game, I think I was very much heartened, we'll go with that as the term, that they weren't flat in the third period in a close game where they had a 1-goal lead. And so I think that you got to take the good with the bad. I think I need to see more of the type of Boston third period before I fully buy it, because the Detroit third period is what we've seen for the most part this season.
And I think the concern, too, with that third period is just that you would like to see them, okay, if we can't get through the neutral zone, if we can't create the kind of controlled looks that we want, how can we just open things up and maybe take a few more risks? And I think that that's just something that this team has just not been comfortable doing, and something that we'll talk about it standings-wise, but they're going to have to take some risks to climb up this ladder.
Yep. All right. So, and for those of you out there that might want to take a risk on yourself, maybe want to try to get yourself into some good shape moving forward. Put the stock in yourself. None of that was a great transition, but you
started off great.
I tried, but for those of you out there that want to find your workout routine, we have a sponsor for you on this episode, Alpha Progression. This is a fantastic, fantastic app. It's no BS training for muscle growth. Alpha Progression is the go-to app for anyone trying to training to maximize muscle gain. We're focused 100% on that. It's science-based and developed by serious lifters with personal training and competitive bodybuilding backgrounds. And they've also been recognized twice as App of the Day by Apple, We are by far, or they are by far, the top-rated fitness app in Germany and have recently started expanding their reach to users worldwide, aka people listening to this show. And their users love the user interface and constantly tell them how easy it is to use, even though it's packed with features, making it the ideal tool for both novices and seasoned lifters. And this is really where it comes in their plan generators. Their plan generators or plans are generated from scratch and according to the user's needs, like what muscles they want to focus on and what equipment they have. I personally have a home gym in my garage. It's really fantastic to be able to put in what you have and what you don't have. And if you're going to a big gym, a big box gym, you can put in what they have there. Well, and there are over 1,000 trillion input combinations. Quality-wise, their plans measure up to the best personal trainers in the world. They had a coach who charges $500 a month tell them that their app follows exactly the same principles. And the principles are all about strength training. And all that means is progression. Their algorithm analyzes past performances and gives a recommendation for weight and reps in every set, which is really important for long-term success. And unless you're someone that really uses a spreadsheet, a notebook, which I am not, this is the best way to track because it tells you exactly what you need to lift. It tells you what you need to hit. It's really great. And so the pro version is currently $12.99 per month or $79.99 per year with a 2-week free trial. And you can get 20% off your first payment using the link alphaprogression.com/CTP. Once again, that's 20% off your first payment using the link alphaprogression.com/CTP.
So, finishing up on the Red Wings game,
Yeah.
I don't think it was a great game. I think I will give them a little bit of grace just because tail end of a back-to-back, still kind of find a way. It's not a sustainable recipe for success, but they did have success, and they're at least the players that were kind of driving that bus were the kids. Zooming
Let
out
me ask
a little.
you this. Let me ask you this. Do you think 1-0-1 is I guess to go with the term from Money Pack, do you think this is the deserve to standing or deserve to point -meter
I don't
for the
think
weekend?
I don't think that they played well enough to deserve a win yesterday. So I think losing that game, whether it's in regulation or overtime, feels about right. And I think that against Boston, they did enough to get a win. So splitting the weekend, I'm not going to get into win or loss versus overtime loss, but a split feels right, and it ended up being 3 out of 4 instead of 2 out of 4.
Yeah.
Given how they played, I think that looking across the roster, the thing that is really glaring right now is, and this is something that we keep talking about, so people might be sick of hearing about this, but the blue line, it's just Drew Hellison had a really great start. He really did. And he still is a solid player. He still does useful things. I think even in this Detroit game, he had some really interesting offensive moments. And early in the game, he had a play off of the blue line, kind of looking like Jackson Lacombe almost, where he dances around a defender. But the mistakes are starting to pile up. And yes, he is a young player, so that will happen. But I just don't think that outside of being a right shot, there is anything that should demand him being in the lineup every night. I think that he needs to be much more in this rotation with Minchikov and Zellweger because he's just struggling a little bit right now. He's not really playing like we saw when he first came in.
Yep, I agree completely with that. I just don't think it should be a priority. And similar to, I think, with the forward group, I don't think playing Ryan Strome at center should be a priority. Like, I think that's the other glaring thing here, that while that line scored against the Red Wings, and Frank Vetrano also scored against, I think it was at the tail end of 4-on-4, but scored against Boston. I think that putting Troy Terry with whether it's Mason McTavish or Trevor Zegras is just going to yield better results for you.
Or Leo Carlson.
Yeah, like there's just better options there. And I think that to me, looking at this and kind of taking a zoom back, trying to really apply what I had said of avoiding priors, looking at this team right now, looking where they're at, I think they played 2 solid games. But I actually think that from a critical side of it, I think that it should be better than that, though. And maybe that people won't like hearing that, but I think this team should be better than what they showed in these games because they are leaving food on the table, I'm just now using a bunch of terms.
Well,
I'm
the
delirious.
penalties makes everything look a lot worse. I will say that.
But I also think that if you have a better lineup, right, that's inherently going to create a better situation. And so if we think that this lineup is not ideal, I think that that is just something. I think that they've just stuck with certain lines for too long. And
Well, it's because they're winning games.
Sure.
They're 7-2-1 in their last 10.
Sure.
And that's why it's kind of just
Fair.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. That is
Fair.
That is for sure the thought process of
Fair.
the coaching staff.
No,
right
that's
now.
fair. Yeah. But
they just lost, and it was an uneven performance against Boston as well. So I think maybe we'll see some tweaks. Actually, you know what? We're for sure going to see some tweaks.
We are definitely going to see some tweaks.
Trevor Zegras. So in that Detroit game, I don't even really know how else to say it, but just a really bad blindside hit to the head on, was it Johansson or Rasmussen? One of the two. Michael Rasmussen comes across from center ice. Rasmussen gets rid of the puck. Zegras takes at least 2 more strides after Rasmussen gets rid of the puck, and Zegras makes contact with him from the blind side. It's at a minimum interference, but then he also makes head contact, so you also get into the head contact issues. And Zegras was suspended 3 games for that hit. And as someone who has long been and continues to be a Trevor Zegras defender, I really think I think he's much better than he's given credit for. That was a low moment for him. That was a cheap shot. That was a dirty hit. There's no excuse for it. You can argue whether 3 games is too much, blah, blah. You can have that debate, but at its core, that was a low light for him. And for someone who wants to be a leader on this team, the Ducks right now are in a playoff race. They are 6 points out after this weekend. They're 6 points out of the final wildcard spot. And he will now miss the next 3 games, one of those games being on Thursday against the Vancouver Canucks, who the Ducks are chasing in the standings. That they're the team holding down that final wildcard spot. So to me, it's just a bad play. I'm going to use the word. It's a selfish play. There was nothing to be gained by taking out Rasmussen there in the way that he did. So shame on you, Trevor Zegras.
I mean, to get my thoughts on it, there's a couple things here for me personally on this. First off, textbook suspension, like late, high, injury on the play. All the markers that the Department of Player Safety is going to look for a suspension are there. You look at any of the suspensions. There was one a couple weeks ago to someone on Tampa Bay Lilleberg, I think, who got 2 games for interference. That one was a little bit more head on and not as much hitting from the side, from the blind side, which is why I think that there was a difference of 2 versus 3 there. If you look at any other illegal contact to the head suspension this season, it's been 3 games. Tanner Jeannot was actually kind of a very similar hit, but not as late, and that got 3 games earlier on in the season. So I think 3 games is probably about right here for Zegras in this situation. What if it was 2? I think that would be fine. 3, I'm fine with also. I think in that 2 to 4 range, honestly, is probably where I think this should have been, and kind of split the middle and gave him 3. But overall, when you look at this play, like, I think personally what I want to break down here overall is kind of the decisions that were made by Zegras and why I just think it's overall frustration from that perspective, because the puck breaks out of the zone and he's actually side by side with the Detroit Red Wings player. You have Olin Zellweger, who's in front of Rasmussen and is the one that's kind of pushing him towards the wall, forces him to chip it off the boards. And then there's another Detroit Red Wings player more towards center ice that Jacob Trouba has. And instead of Trevor Zegras kind of sticking with his man, he takes this really wide angle to then go after Rasmussen. And it just is going out of his way to kind of be overly aggressive to make a hit instead of keeping good defensive posture. And so that, to me, first off, is we criticize whether it's Radko Gudas, whether it's Jacob Trouba, these guys that, whether it's Drew Hellison, like there are different guys on this team that will sometimes go out of their way to make hits, and it pulls them out of good, proper defensive position to try to lay the body, and it ends up hurting the team. That is exactly kind of what this was. And so even if in this situation, he gets to Rasmussen on time, right? And isn't late and isn't high, goes through the shoulder there. And it's a quote unquote legal hit from the rule book perspective. It's still him going out of his way to take himself out of position. And so I just think overall that's a poor defensive decision by him overall. Maybe it's him. wanting to be overly aggressive to the body, but who knows? Regardless, he makes this poor decision. But then once you take that away, there's also the hitting him late, taking the strides into him, and then going up high. And so all of it combined is just a poor decision to even go out of his way to make the hit, and then also just very poor timing, very poor decision making to even go for the hit when after that puck has been released. So 3 games is correct in this situation. And yeah, that to me is about
this is
it.
also the exact kind of hit that I think the league has done a really good job of cutting down on.
Yes.
This, because there used to be that saying, oh, don't admire your pass after you get rid of the puck because someone may come in and blindside you. And that shouldn't be the case. I mean, that's what got Paul Correa flatlined by Scott Stevens. And I mean, this type of play is in that vein where a player gets rid of the puck. He's no longer eligible to be hit. He's in open ice. You can't expect guys to... You can't ask guys to still think they have to protect themselves a good couple seconds after getting rid of the puck in open ice. And that's what Zegras did there. He hit him with no opportunity for Rasmussen to defend himself. Like, it's just as dirty as it gets. There's just no defending Trevor Zegras here.
And I think to add something onto that is that neither of us are in his head. Neither of us know if there's an intent to hit the head there or if he's trying to go through the shoulder.
I don't think he's trying to hurt him. Yeah.
No. But regardless, the point is it doesn't really matter in the situation with the rule because it's a mistimed hit. Whether on purpose it's mistimed, well, I guess mistimed wouldn't be on purpose, but whether he is on purpose getting the head or it's just he's trying to go through the shoulder and mistimes it, it doesn't matter because at the end of it all, he catches the head, which causes an injury, which is all that matters in this situation.
The intent is irrelevant. Like what he intended to do does not matter. It's what he ended up doing, and clearly the actual hit was deliberate because he could have laid off of Rasmussen. Like he took a couple extra strides after Rasmussen got rid of the puck. So anyway, can only beat a dead horse so much, but it was a bad play.
And then the other talking point that came out of it that I saw a lot of, you probably saw a lot of, was the Sherratt play that came at the end of the period. They're just not comparable at all. Like the Sherratt play, yes, it's dumb.
Nobody got injured.
Well, not only that, yes, it's a bad play by Sherratt, but it's a forearm to the side of the head. It's something that happens in all these scrums. Like if that is going to be a fine or suspension, it wasn't a cross check to the head. It wasn't any of these things. Like if that's going to be a fine or suspension, then any scrum with a punch is going to be a fine or suspension. And if that's the route that people want to take, I'm here for it. Like, I'm here for that type of stuff. Protect players' heads, protect all that stuff. But that's not where the league's at. That's typically not what fans want even. And it only gets elevated because I think Vetrano probably goes down a little bit easy there trying to sell calls there because of how much the Ducks... And I'm someone that's completely fine with Frank Vetrano doing that.
I thought that only opposing teams did that. I didn't know the Ducks did that too.
Completely fine with Vetrano going down easy there to draw a call, and he did, and good on him for that.
He went flying, as if he had been hit by a projectile. But anyway, yeah, I sell that call. Who cares? Like, get the penalty.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the big talking point coming out of the game, is a suspension, and it's unfortunate. Hopefully, Zegras learns from it, and
yeah.
The next 3 games for the Ducks, they've got Buffalo, then they got Vancouver, and then they've got Chicago. And I think that Buffalo and Chicago are still winnable for them without Zegras, but Vancouver is going to be a tall task. That is a team that they have to beat. They have to beat in regulation if they want to stay. If they want to make up ground in this race, like they can't go in there and give Vancouver any points. And so we'll see. All this to say that the Ducks are 6 points out. They have a game in hand on the Canucks in that final spot. Like, it's at least interesting right now. There's some scoreboard watching going on.
It is, and that's where I'm trying to come at this with a fresh set of eyes. Right? I think us talking about the negatives about this team only goes so far. I think those are all still there. But at the end of the day, if this team keeps winning these games and get into this race, I'll be critical as I always am of the games and what I think they can do better. But at a certain point, you need to kind of look at how they're playing and what they can do better, what they can't, and how to win these games down the stretch.
Yeah, and I mean, against Boston, you saw kind of some hints of that recipe of what they can look like in the stretch and some improvement. So we'll see. It's interesting because I didn't think that in either of those games there were really true standout individual performances. It was just kind of a collective effort. And I mean, 3 out of 4 points is what they needed. They are going to need to play at a they're I
High
mean
clip.
they're at a seven. I mean, in their last 10 games, they are 7-2-1. They're going to have to sustain that clip.
Yeah.
If they want to make the playoffs. And right now, playoffs are still a long shot. 6 points with 3 teams ahead of you. That's just the reality. But they have at least put themselves in a position, and you can debate whether they have done so fully deservingly or not, but they are in a position where they can play meaningful games. And I think that that's what is going to make this last stretch, these last 26 games, all the more fascinating because there's actually consequences to these games. I mean, how many times in the last, since we've started this podcast, have the games just kind of stopped mattering by the end of February?
And what I've realized also coming out of that break is, I think, yes, you look at overall in totality of the season. This has not been a good season at 5-on-5. Everything I've said prior still applies of goaltending is driving them. But if they can, quote unquote, turn a corner and start playing better hockey, they have now put themselves in a position with that strong goaltending to make a push for this playoffs. And so
Yeah.
can they get on a stretch where maybe there is the growth? Like the argument that you were making when we had our debate of if there is growth from these younger players, if it is this, maybe not linear, but we're seeing them play better, can that drive them into the situation? And I think that is the fascinating thing that I'm going to be looking for here of what's driving this. Are these young players taking a step? Is this sustainable? Is it not? And I think that's what you're probably going to hear from me down this stretch with this team. And so they're off to a decent start, I think.
Yeah, it's a new season. It's a new day.
Yeah.
It's a new everything. And in fact, there's even a trade today. So the topics just don't stop flowing.
Yeah.
So I guess just to give everyone some context, because otherwise I think this trade kind of doesn't make as much sense. Callie Klang, goalie for the San Diego Gulls, is month to month. He was hurt a couple weeks ago, and he is out for the foreseeable future. And over the weekend, John Gibson had to leave the game against Boston after the second period. He is day-to-day. The Ducks had to call up Oscar Dansk, goalie for the San Diego Gulls. So he is up with the big club right now. Gibson should be back soon, is what we're hearing. He's day-to-day. But today, the Ducks, just to have goalies in San Diego, essentially, while Dansk is up, or when Dansk returns, they traded with the Detroit Red Wings yet again, sending future considerations over to the Red Wings in exchange for Ville Husso, who has primarily been an AHL goalie this season. But now, once Gibson comes back, the San Diego Gulls and Husso will report to them immediately. They'll have a tandem of Dansk and Husso down there, which is an upgrade over what they had.
Yep. I think overall, when you zoom out on this deal and try to figure out why the Ducks are doing it, it makes sense.
And I guess just
with Callie Klang being hurt.
Just to add a little more context too, you know who's also 7-2-1 in their last 10?
The San Diego Gulls.
The San Diego Gulls are 7-2-1, and the San Diego Gulls have won 6 games in a row. And at one point this weekend, we are no longer at that point, but they were 5 points out of the final playoff spot in the Pacific Division. Now they are 7 points out, but they are also in the thick of a race. And so with Callie Klang out for who knows how long, you can't have an ECHL goalie up in Butayets, so they are loading up on goalies, and I like it. Give the Gulls a chance. Like that team, for those who haven't been watching their games, like there's some fun things going on down there. So from that standpoint, I think this is a great deal.
Correct.
There's another standpoint, though.
Yes. And so I think you can understand why the Ducks would want to do this and understand why they're going out and getting him. The issue here is that if you look at the contract that Ville Husso is on, he is currently on a deal that is worth, let me just confirm this real quick, $4.75 million AAV. And when you bury that contract, you are able to get it down to 3.6 because for those of you that don't know, when the contract is over, I think it's like 1.25 million. You can put the guy in the AHL, but there is a residual cap hit on your salary cap. But the issue I have here with this deal overall is that the Ducks basically took on this cap hit, and yes, completely understand the context of the Ducks have all the cap space in the world this season. This is not going to hurt them long term. This is not going to hurt them this season, even
Yeah,
from the salary
Husso's
cap
a
perspective.
UFA at the end of the year, so
But when you're talking about value and needing to get proper value for guys and wanting to understand if Pat Verbeek understands what the proper value is, you are essentially eating, I think it's well over $1 million in actual salary on this guy for the remainder of the season. And you have now given the Detroit Red Wings, you freed up, granted, prorated all the different types of stuff, but you have freed up $3.6 million in cap space for them, and you have not gotten anything in return. And so from that perspective, I am just really not a fan of this deal because you are essentially just doing them a favor. Like that is essentially what this is from a cap perspective, is Pat Verbeek doing Steve Yzerman a solid here. Maybe he lost a round of golf, and this was the end result of that.
over the Four Nations break.
But so it's like it can be two things. This can be a good thing for the Ducks, good thing for the goals in terms of helping out the goals and their run, but it can also be a poor deal from the value perspective and what the Ducks were able to get in return. And I think it's not going to hurt the Ducks long term. Realistically, you look at the contract that they took on, they should have gotten a second round pick for taking that on.
Yeah,
especially with him being an AHLer. But I don't actually think that second round pick would really matter that much. It's more so my issue here is, does Verbeek understand where the value is at with his cap space and how to properly value it, how to properly manage that, or is he someone that's just going to be taken advantage of in this situation?
I think that there's maybe some context here.
Okay.
And I'm not saying this to defend Verbeek, because I think I agree with your point just in the kind of theoretical, when a team moves cap space, which is what, I mean, that's why Ville Husso's in the AHL, as
Correct.
far as I can tell, because his contract didn't make sense for the Red Wings to have, given what he was giving them. When a team moves on a contract that they don't want to have, usually they have to pay the other team to give that up. And we now have two examples this season of Pat Verbeek getting into trades where that logic didn't apply. Now I think Trouba, you can say, oh, it was the waiver situation.
Correct.
That changes it. Fine. Okay. We'll say just this one time. In this one time, I think that the context that you can maybe point to is that the Red Wings aren't necessarily strapped cap space wise. Like, I just wonder, what was the genesis of this deal? How did this originate? Is this just Pat Verbeek saying, we're down a goalie, we need a goalie, I'm going to call my best friend Steve Yzerman and get one? I don't think that this was the Red Wings shopping Ville Husso, trying to get rid of him and giving up the leverage to the team. I think that this was Pat Verbeek trying to get a goalie, realizing what's going on with the organizational goalie depth. And you look at the goalies down in Grand Rapids, they've got Jack Campbell and Sebastian Cossa. So maybe it was just a perfect storm of they can also move off of Husso since they have other goalies there. I don't know. But I think that the reason that there was outside of just the friendship between the two GMs, I think that the reason that there's nothing being paid by the Red Wings is because the Red Wings weren't in a hurry. They weren't in any kind of rush to move Ville Husso. This deal just kind of happened, and I think that it was the Ducks who were the ones who called. That would be my guess. What do you think about my theory?
I think it's possible. Let's see. I mean, their projected cap space right now, they're at 13 million after this deal has happened. So they were probably at 10 mil.
Yeah, they're at 10 mil on Puckpedia.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at
right
now.
Deadline cap space, they're at 13.6. So this isn't a team that like needed to move
with Ville Husso, they were probably around 10. So this freed up 3. I mean, it kind of depends, I guess, if they end up using that for anything at the end of all of this. But I think that's a valid point. I guess my only concern is just making sure essentially that Pat Verbeek is able to understand essentially what that value is. Because, well, yes, and there are people in our chat saying like this is a team that will help the Ducks out. Why?
Well, yeah, but that part I think we're not questioning whatsoever.
Agreed.
This is a good acquisition for the organization.
Agreed.
Yeah.
But I think that you have to be cautious of doing a deal that is going to be a negative overall. And maybe this isn't, I guess, to put it that way. It's not. You're not really doing anything completely negative. But it just calls into question some things moving forward and just some concerns on my end, I guess is the best way
Well,
to put it.
I think what you're concerned about is that Pat Verbeek is less concerned about getting proper value in a deal as opposed to just getting the player that he wants. Like that's kind of what we saw with Truba.
Yes.
That's what we saw with Husso, and I think that you have concerns about that. And I think that those concerns are valid and are going to be left unanswered until we see more trades. But
Yes.
at least for right now, just so people fully understand, the critique isn't about acquiring Ville Husso. That part is fine. And also, we haven't talked about this at all. But like now, if the Ducks were to trade John Gibson at the trade deadline, it'll be easier to do that because you could call up
Correct.
Husso. You could have him be your backup. I mean,
Correct.
he does have
and
an NHL track record.
and there's also probably something from the perspective of they're probably closer to the cap floor if they do trade Gibson now.
Yeah,
Like that was something that popped into my head. But it like these are all extenuating circumstances around it, but still when you isolate the deal, the fact that you took on a cap hit without getting really anything in return, that kind of just goes contrary to any sort of understanding of cap
trade
space
trade
like,
logic.
Yes. You get what I'm saying here, right?
Yes, no, and I get that, and I think that that's valid. I also think that everything can be true here. Like,
Yes,
this
agreed.
doesn't, the value doesn't make total sense, but the deal is fine. I mean, Husso's contract is coming up this summer. I don't think he's getting what he got on his current contract again. So this could end up looking like a good deal. I mean, hell, if the Ducks trade John Gibson, now they don't need to have a goalie back, and maybe they then promote Ville Husso back and he finds his game again in the NHL. I mean, that might be unlikely given his recent history. I mean, he wasn't very good the last couple of years, but it'll be something to watch. It'll be something to follow. It could end up. I think that the likeliest thing is just that even if, honestly, what I could see is that even if they trade Gibson, they still get a goalie back and just keep the Husso Dansk tandem because this just really feels like an AHL move to me.
The real winner in all of this is Ville Husso. Gets to go from Grand Rapids, Michigan to San Diego, California.
Why are you hating on Grand Rapids?
I'm not. It's just not
You
San
are.
Diego.
There's an implicit hate in
Is there?
What if Grand Rapids is better than
Is it
San
better than
Diego?
San Diego?
Well, tomorrow in Grand Rapids, the high will be 45 degrees with a low of 30 degrees. So it's colder. Sure, it's colder. Doesn't make it bad. Doesn't make
I'm
it a
just
bad
saying,
city.
He gets to go to the beautiful city of San Diego.
Yeah, I just Googled Grand Rapids weather. And if you go to images, there's just like
Snow.
images of the road. Just you can't even see because there's so much snow coming down. Okay, if you just Google Grand Rapids, it's pretty. It's nice. There's a
No doubt from me at all. But it's still not San
There's
Diego.
a nice downtown. There's a bridge going through the downtown.
Oh, there's a bridge. Great. Lovely.
It's better than San Diego. How about that?
Oh, I see this bridge. The Coronado
it's
Bridge
nice.
is better.
You know what? I'm gonna stand up for the little people of Grand Rapids, while you coastal elites just continue your superiority.
All right. Want to get to questions?
I feel like there was one other thing I wanted to talk about.
There was?
What was it? Oh, I just wanted to bring this up. I mean, this might come up in questions, but I figured I'll dump a little bit of it out here. Got to watch some goals this weekend, and they're playing very well. And I think that what's really exciting for the goals right now is just that the young kids are really driving the bus. They are getting great contributions from the line of Sasha Pasajov. Now it's Nikita Nesterenko with them, and Jan Mishak. Pasajov is playing really, really well. His offense has just kind of found a new level. Sam Colangelo's playing well. Tristan Luneau's at a point per game in the AHL. Like, Luneau's game isn't perfect by any means, but seeing them all kind of break out offensively, Sidorov you can maybe throw in there a little bit too. Gaucher's been able to find the back of the net recently. Seeing their offense come up and seeing them chase a playoff spot, like that's what you want to see. Like you need one of these guys to come up and be an NHLer at some point. And this might be the most niche thing I'll say today, but I think the Justin Bailey Pavel Regenda trade was great for the goals. Bailey is a much more useful player than Regenda ever was. So there you go.
There it is. All right,
Goals.
we're going to start with questions from our Patreon exclusive Discord. Go to patreon.com/crashspawn, where you can subscribe to us at the $2 tier, where you get access to our Patreon exclusive Discord. And there's a podcast questions channel that we go to right away. So Charbonneau said, over under 4,000, I beg your pardons, in AHLer's career. Haller's career. Yeah. Man, we were just talking about the AHL. That's so messed with my brain.
Yeah. Johnny had a tough weekend in terms of spotting players.
Yeah.
Tough weekend. Yeah,
Toronto was Killorn?
The hilarious one to me was calling Lacombe Gauthier. Or I might have that backwards, but either way, like, those two guys are very hard to confuse. But you know what? I'll go easy on him. Okay. He had 2 weeks off. You got to get yourself back into shape.
I'm going over on the question.
Oh, I forgot about the question.
Yeah. Endymion said, is Montreal more likely to keep or trade Jake Evans, given his pending UFA status and solid season so far? What would you do?
They need to trade him. And before the Four Nations break, he had an interview where he was talking about his time in Montreal in the past tense. So he's gone.
There it is. Our good friend Pat, who was on last week's Crash the Draft, said, assuming Marner hits the UFA market, and with so many teams presumably having available cap space, will the Ducks, assuming they're interested, be better off offering a short-term higher AAV deal than a 7x14? And do you think he'd consider a deal in the 4x17 range?
I think it's so hard to say, but I did hear a theory on the PDO cast about how just because the cap is going to go up to over $100 million in the next few years, it doesn't necessarily mean that every player's salary is going to go up proportionally 20%. It could mean that teams are just going to pay superstars more and be able to amass more superstars and then try to take discounts elsewhere. I think that Marner is going to want as much term as he can get. I would be a little surprised if he goes with the four-year route, but I could be wrong. Maybe he saw Austin Matthews being a trendsetter in Toronto and wants to do that now as a UFA.
Yeah, I don't know if I buy that about the middle guys getting pinched there. I think largely because I think
Really? You don't think the middle class has any chance of getting pinched?
Wow, going there. No, but in this situation, the reason for that is that I think until it starts happening, I just don't buy that the higher end players are going to take shorter term deals. I think they're all just gonna lock in at these longer term deals and lock in at those rates. And so realistically, what that ends up meaning is that teams are gonna have that, and then where does the money go after that's all locked in? Is that as the cap keeps rising, they're able to spend more on other guys. And I think one of the interesting things, like a criticism, for instance, of the Maple Leafs is that they're big four, right? Of all the money they invested in Tavares, Nylander, Matthews, and Marner. And you could even throw Morgan Riley in that for them. And realistically, what kind of screwed them over was the pandemic. Because without the pandemic, there is not a flat cap. And so if the cap keeps rising like it should have, that would have ended up resulting in them being able to build out a team in a better situation. So
yes. Another thing I wanted to add there is that Mitch Marner made me a believer in the Four Nations face-off.
We should probably actually answer this question about Marner.
I said no. I don't think he'd do. I mean, isn't that what you're saying?
I think he'll do. Yeah, I think he'll do 7. He would, or well, I guess would the Ducks, assuming their interest, be better off offering shorter term, higher AAV?
I just don't think that shorter term contract is really. I just don't think it's going to happen.
I guess from the Ducks' perspective, what's better? 4x17 or 7x14?
For the team, shorter is always going to be better. I just don't think that's on the table. Like he's not going to accept that.
I did actually hear this. Alex O'Vera brings this up. Alan Walsh on the Agent Provocateur said he had heard some NHL GMs are predicting shorter term, higher AAV deals. With
Maybe.
The cap rising.
Everyone's got an opinion right now about how the cap will shake out.
Yep.
I think what people forget is that the player is still a part of this, and players want security. Yep. And you have worked your entire career to get to this point to get your big contract. If you take a 4-year deal and then you tear your ACL in year 3, you just gave up 3 years potentially of max earning. So I think that if given the choice, players are still going to take longer term deals. But I do want to advocate for the Ducks offering him the 7 times whatever, because I think seeing his playmaking, seeing that kind of added level of creativity he added to Canada, I think that the Ducks would really benefit from a player like that. So,
Yep. And Hammock M said, are there any scenarios where the Ducks become buyers at the trade deadline?
we're in it. We are in that scenario. We are literally in that scenario, folks. They are.
I think they are soft buyers. I still think that we could see a Brian Dumoulin trade, but I think that they would look for someone to come in that has term on their deal.
So the trade deadline is going to be 10 days away when people
Oh
are
yeah,
listening
that
to
was
this
what we
podcast.
didn't talk about.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have time to get to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is what we didn't talk about. But the trade deadline is soon, and the Ducks, I mean, it's literally game by game right now, but there's like, to me, isn't this a scenario now where if you're Pat Verbeek, and I would actually agree with this, believe it or not, the team is playing well. Yes, the process is not perfect, but don't you kind of want to, do you really want to do another deadline where you just ship people out and you play out the string with AHL call-ups? I think that at a certain point, you have to show your team that you believe in them and you want to give them a chance. And I think that there's just really no harm, given where the Ducks are at in their rebuild, of just keeping certain guys, or like you said, trading people as kind of a soft buy to go and get someone with term, and to give this team a little bit of life, to make these last 26 games mean something, as opposed to just, again, like, oh, cool, we're going to wait for someone out of college to come by or someone from the AHL to come up. I think that the Ducks are past that point. The game's got to mean something.
Okay.
Do you disagree with that?
No, I don't disagree with that, but I also do think I think
Like,
probably from it's more so a structuring of the team perspective.
I think that what you don't like is the idea of rewarding the process that has not been perfect for this team, that has been bad at times.
It's a mixture of that. It's also a mixture of, I think this team will be better off once Brian Dumoulin is moved, because of the logjam that we've constantly talked about.
And that may still happen, though. Like,
Yeah,
I think you can
for
have
sure.
you can have it both ways, where you can still be a soft buyer and potentially move guys. But I think that making this team better, bringing better players, gives the process a chance to improve as well.
This is agreed. This is going to be a fascinating deadline, because let's say, for instance, he moves out Dumoulin, he moves out Fabry. Maybe he doesn't bring anyone in on the blue line. Maybe he just runs with what they have there, and gives the young guys these games, these important minutes down the stretch, which is what he wanted. And then he goes and gets a forward talent that is more useful than Robbie Fabry for this.
Mikko Rantanen?
No.
Do you think he's getting traded, by the way?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I think Carolina knew that this was a possibility for him to just be a rental.
Yeah.
And I think from their perspective, like, yes, sure, it's not great that you lose him, but like, you have to go for it. Like, this is, you knew what you were signing up for by bringing in Mikko Rantanen, and you have a team that can win the cup. You're not going to move him out.
I mean, teams always make moves with scenarios in mind.
Yes.
And yes.
All right, so we have one question from Blue Sky that we'll get to. Random Hockey Thoughts said, assuming Dumoulin, Fabry out, Luno, this is for next season, to be clear, not the deadline. Fabro out, Luno, Seneca in, Ducks roster is set for the next season. How do you improve from here? Do you play Strome on the fourth line, trade someone? By process of elimination, they can only trade McTavish or Zegras, but it is hard to improve this way. What would you do?
Okay. So I do think that adding a top 9 forward would be really helpful. I think that you need to go and add someone to this forward lineup, whether that's through trade or free agency. But maybe that is flipping a defenseman. But I think that the forwards just need to be beefed up going into next season.
Yep. All right. Now we're going to get to Twitch and YouTube. So for those of you listening on your favorite podcast services, you can find us when we go live at twitch.tv/crashspawn, where if you have Amazon Prime, you get one free Twitch Prime gaming sub every month, and you do have to hit that every single month. You can be just like our good friend Kempafu, who resubbed for his 54th month. So thank you so much for that. Or if you're listening and you have a YouTube account, go to youtube.com/crashpond, where you can find our videos there. Subscribe to our channel. You can see Felix, maybe me, most likely not me, but every once in a while maybe.
Every now and again.
Do some post game streams if we have the time and are able to. But go to our channel, subscribe. You'll get notified when we go live. So Ronald McDonald left this question earlier in a YouTube chat that I wanted to get to, saying won't be able to stay, but had 2 questions that he wanted to ask. Can you see Solberg playing NHL games next season? No, I don't think so. There's too much of a logjam.
I mean, he's now playing again in the SHL, but yeah, he's a year away from being a year away.
I think he could be in the AHL next year.
Yeah, sure.
And then he said Verbeek tried to get Stamkos in March or so. Does he try for Besser?
What is with the Brock Besser love? Can someone explain it to me?
He scores goals.
Yeah, I mean, I guess he'd help this team. I honestly am just not that familiar with his game.
Yeah.
So I can't answer that. I'm sorry.
All right. Austin Price asks us, how would you define success for the Ducks in this last 26-game stretch?
I think that is a tough question because the thing I would like them to do is to play a more structured, even, consistent game out instead of relying on their goalie as much as they have to start the season. That's what I would like to see. And that's it. I mean, I think that what I wanted going into the season and what I want in these last 26 games is the same. Obviously, you want the games to keep mattering because I do think that that's good for this team. It's like every game that they buy themselves of still being in the hunt is just good for their development. So,
yep. All right. Crowbar asked this question for Felix. After watching some of the goals games, do you see any potential NHLers outside of Luneau and Colangelo?
I mean, people probably know. You probably know what my answer is going to be to this, but I just really love Jan Mishak's game. I think I put it in our group chat this weekend, but he is going to play in the NHL. I don't know if it'll be for the Ducks, but he's going to play in the NHL. And Passajov, I'm coming around to Passajov as well. I don't know exactly what it'll look like, but the production is like really impressive for considering he started in the ECHL.
I mean, that's kind of what the like whole knock on it, or not knock, but the read on him was during the draft was like he just scores.
Well, I think what's interesting is that he's still not a great skater, but he's kind of figured out how to work around it a little bit. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, when guys do that thing where they call it like the Mohawk stride.
Yes. Cam Fowler did it a lot.
He does that a lot in the corners where like he'll kind of use that to just fend off defenders and buy himself some time because he doesn't have the edges to really like make those tight turns. So he just kind of glides around and he's finding ways to make it work. It's just, the question is he going to be a great AHLer or is he going to be able to kind of take that next step? And that's what I would like to see at some point.
Okay. Let's blitz through a few more questions, then we'll get on out of here because I need to actually go do something after this. Darius Otero said, yes. Said, have you watched Kashan Aitchison for this draft? Seems like a Verbeek guy if the Ducks pick. Okay. We'll just move on from there. Let's see. Jacob Page said, at this point, do you think Pat Verbeek still does some head coach shopping this offseason, or do you think he gets another year because the Ducks started winning?
I think Cronin's back.
I think so at this point also.
Like, there's just no way he's not back next season.
Yeah. And I think that is going to do it for us.
Someone asked if we think the Ducks will trade Minchikov.
Oh, that's right. Sorry, missed that. Yeah, Steven Hashigian said, do you think the Ducks will trade Minchikov with all these scratches? No.
I think that he's still a key asset for this team.
Correct.
I guess just I want your quick gut take on the trade deadline. Is that okay? Can you tough it out another 2 minutes?
Sure.
I just want your gut take. So don't dilly-dally on this too much. I'm just going to give you names. Tell me what happens to them.
Okay.
Robbie Fabry.
Traded.
Really?
That's more of a want than a prediction. I guess I'll say that.
I feel like he stays.
He likely does, but
his contract also makes him kind of harder to trade.
I also just think like you need to reward some of the guys in the AHL.
But here's my issue with that. While I don't disagree with you, I think those guys are where they should be. I think that they're in the exact right situation.
Getting Colangelo in the NHL lineup.
Yes, Colangelo. Okay. Yes. You sold me, Colangelo.
There you go.
Colangelo should be in the NHL. Yes, I thought for some reason I thought you were talking about like pass a job or something.
No.
Brock McGinn.
No answer.
Just kidding. Isaac Lundestrom.
Oh, he's still in the Ducks.
Yeah. Brett Leeson.
Still in the Ducks.
Okay. Brian Dumoulin.
I think Dumoulin gets traded. I think that the logjam just needs to get cleared up. I think at a certain point, it just has to.
Whereas, like with Fabry, there's not really a big reason to trade him.
The only reason to trade him is if the management group views him the way that we view him.
Sure, but what I'm saying is like with Dumoulin, there's a clear like, oh, if you trade him, you're clearing up this log.
Sure.
jam.
Yeah.
There's not really that with Fabry.
Yeah.
John Gibson.
You know what? Screw it. Traded.
Is that the answer you'd have had before today? Before
I don't
Ville
know.
Husso?
Yes. Like, Ville Husso does not change my opinion.
Okay. I want to throw someone else at you, but I don't know if I can. Ryan Strome.
On the trade board list.
He's on the trade board.
He stays.
I don't know why. That doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Any one of the young defensemen. Do we see anyone moved? You can throw in Hellison into that.
No. I mean, I was just curious. I'm looking at the trade bait list on TSN. Do you think the Ducks go after Rickard Rakell?
How many years
That
does he have
reunion
left?
would be fun.
How many years?
3
does he
more
have left?
years.
I will say Raquel is a very poor man's version of kind of what I want this team to add in Mitch Marner, where it's just a little more skill and finishing and creativity from the wing would go a long way.
Ryan Strome's on TSN's trade bait. Oh, wait. I think they're both made by Chris Johnston.
Yeah, he works for both.
But
He's a double agent.
Ryan Strome's on both of them.
Well, but it's the same person. It's the same list.
TSN staff. So it's more. I think it's Pierre LeBrun also.
Oh shit, that would make zero sense though. Like
Ryan Strome for Rickard Rakell.
Now that would be one of the most pointless trades. If like I'm talking from Pittsburgh's perspective.
Sure.
I don't know why in the hell Pittsburgh would do that.
Ryan Strome and John Gibson for Rickard Rakell.
I mean, what are the Penguins doing is my question.
They want to win. They're trying to still win next season.
This is
a yes. That's what they've said.
Didn't they trade Marcus Pettersson?
Yes, and this is a reset basically for them. They are trying to still win next season is what
I don't know how they plan on doing that. I mean, I guess like I want to be a millionaire. I want to, like we all want things in life, but I don't know how. Anyway, Rickard Rakell would be a fun reunion. I agree with that.
Yeah.
I just don't know what you have to send to the Penguins to make that happen. Do you send? I guess the benefit of trading Strome in that situation is that you now clear up your center logjam. So, yeah, maybe.
All right.
Is that the soft buy that you're referring to?
Yeah, I think that would be a soft buy.
Are you concerned at all about Rickard Rakell being 31? He's going to be 32 in May.
I mean, Ryan Strome's 31.
I agree. I'm just saying,
it's the same. No,
you're trading.
Yes, in some ways because of the age and age-related decline. But I think when you have so many young players on the team, I think that I'm less worried about that necessarily.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Another fun question for you. I don't know why I'm throwing this at you, but do you think we see a Brad Marchand trade?
No.
Really?
Nope.
Pending UFA?
Nope.
Okay. Whatever you say.
Yep.
All right. Well, thanks for listening, everyone. This was a fun podcast. We covered a lot of ground. We're ending slightly early, below our one and a half hour mark.
Yeah, I need to go to sleep.
If you want to support the podcast, we're going to have a bunch of ways to do that in the show description, but basically go check out our Patreon. For $2 a month, you get access to our patrons only Discord server, connect with us and other fans. You can up that pledge to $7.50, get access to player exclusive shift by shift videos that I put together. I'm actually going to post a couple in the next couple of days of some goals players, so be on the lookout for that. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, leave us comments, leave us feedback there. We really appreciate it. Follow us on all the different social channels. We are on TikTok, I believe. Is TikTok still banned?
No.
Okay, so we are unbanned. Good on us. But yeah, on that note, thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll talk to you soon.
Bye.